you just finished a retreat, right?
I did. Yes.
Do you want to share a little bit about that experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we had a group of about 15 of us go up to Tikal, the ancient Mayan city of Tikal in Guatemala. And yeah, we had a week-long retreat where we, gathered in our home along the shores of Lake Petenitsa, which is this beautiful, historic and sacred lake for the Mayans and for this area. And so that was our retreat home. And then just about an hour north of there is the city of Tikal. So we had a retreat that was really centered around sharing Thanksgiving in a new, and then the parentheses, ancient way, because it was really about returning to our roots and returning to the earth. And through the Mayan Cosmovision that is still so alive and vibrant and continuing in these areas. We were basically guided with local elders into these sacred spaces to infuse our prayers for ourselves and our relations and for the earth. And it was kind of a mix of, yogic practices and Mayan fire ceremonies, Mayan cacao ceremonies, visiting the sacred sites, and, mix in with sound healing and meditative practices, kind of a full, kind of sharing all the things that I love and that those within my kind of tribe love. And it was really beyond my wildest dreams, the whole experience, just to be able to connect to those sacred portals of nature and of man, with the pyramids. And it was really special also because Guatemala and the Mayan cosmovision and culture has had such an impact on my journey that it was really cool to, connect to that ancient city, but also guide others into that way of being, that's very connected to the earth, very connected to the natural cycles of the universe. And I feel just has healing magic inherently woven all the way throughout it.
Mm. Yes, you're speaking my language. I like how
Yeah.
all of that sounds.
Yeah.
And what is the Mayan Cosmovision?
That is a deep, and it's as broad and as wide as you can imagine. Yeah, for me, it's really, as I said, it's really about like earth connection, but just as much star connection, because they really like astrology and astronomy and just an awareness of those cycles that play out in the sky and then are understood as above, so below to play out here on earth. So there's the 20 Mayan Nawales, which are kind of like the universal energies, the big unified one split up into different expressions. And that also plays out through the Mayan calendar. So to speak of the Mayan Cosmovision is also, it's very much connected to the Mayan calendar and the way of like living in tune with the natural cycles. Um, so it's kind of all of that. I know I'm kind of hitting it pretty broadly, but there's so much in there. It's so rich. Um, and then the other aspects I really see are ceremonial ways of being and ceremonies themselves, more like quote unquote formal ceremonies, and the practice of making offerings to the fire, prayers to the fire. Mayan fire ceremonies have been one of the more profound, I would say, spiritual technologies I've encountered on my journey. Just you really have to experience it for yourself to really be able to touch and taste and feel what's happening, and even to start to notice what's happening on the more subtle levels. But it's very much about, communing with the fire as a technology itself and as like a portal to spirit. And I think a core part I also really take from it that's within the whole Mayan cosmovision is like reciprocity, to really like give to nature, like make offerings to the earth, make offerings to the fire, pray for the waters. And that awareness that the more we give to her, to the earth, and to our human family, the more we all receive, the more abundance is generated for all. So that's the Mayan Cosmovision in my own words, but I think it could be described a myriad of different ways because it's so broad and deep at the same time.
That was great. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I think I need to
I
try
try.
the Mayan fire ceremony. I don't think I've done that yet. We lived in Yucatan for 5 years. Different Mayan, not
Yes.
Guatemala Mayan, but still. Um, what's the fire ceremony like? What is that like dancing with fire?
Ooh. No, not probably not in the way you mean that. It's very much dancing with fire. It's reading the fire. It's being, fire is the centerpiece of the ceremony. The Mayan, I can't say that there's uh, just one version of a Mayan fire ceremony, but the consistent themes that I've seen is connecting to each of the 20 nawales, each of those 20 universal energies, prayers and invocations to each of them, gratitude and thanks to each of them, making offerings to the fire for each of them. Um, and I think what's beautiful is within those invocations, you start to connect with and even, yeah, be consciously connected to all the different expressions of the divine, manifest in all of life. So, there's a Nawal that's about like healing, but maybe the masculine energy of healing. There's a Nawal that's really about the feminine version of healing. Um, there's a Nawal that's really centered around like divine justice and like divine law. And um, so it's really, yeah, a process of making like gathered around a fire. It's set up in a specific way with a specific sequence to it. And yeah, you invoke and offer and pray with these different energies. And from there, I think there can be that's kind of the backbone of it. And from there can be like different iterations where I've heard like kind of sound incorporated, or some form of song incorporated, some form of like moving around the fire, different rotations, with different significance of, either sometimes like closing a loop or opening one. These are some of the different like aspects I've seen. And I'm not sure how many of them are more modernly influenced, and how many of them are traditional, but the first part I described, it seems pretty like consistent and I would imagine fairly traditional across the different kind of tribes and cultures within the broader Mayan world.
Yeah. Wow. That's new for me. I like that. Something new to explore.
It's really cool.
Mm. So how did sound healing incorporate in this retreat?
Mm, yeah. Well, sound healing in the sense of like a sound healing session or a sound bath. We had one of those on, I think it was like the fourth day. Um, and that was amazing. That was we had some monkeys that showed up halfway through, very loudly and proudly contributing their vibrations and sound to the experience. And then by the end of it, they were like surrounding our house and underneath the house even. And so that's a cool aspect that often happens in sound healing in spaces where there's a connection to nature. You see nature respond to and contribute and interact with the sounds that are being offered in the space. So that was definitely what was happening up there in Tikal. Um, but also like throughout the retreat, we incorporated different like toning exercises and different, in a way, like self sound healing exercises. I love to share with beings the fact that we have our own vibration and frequency emitting device, and that we can physically ourselves use that to vibrate areas of our body and to release energy, to infuse love. And so that was also just kind of with different facilitators in different practices incorporated in. Whether it's like one of my favorites is working with the bija mantras, which are essentially like seed sounds that we chant that are corresponding with different energy centers of the body. And so we kind of go through, focus our awareness on one particular area, and then we like sound and chant the mantra, directing both our voice and our intention towards that area. And yeah, it's so simple in a way, but so profound. I've offered that part as just an intro to a different ceremony. And before we even got into the ceremony, people have told me that that part alone was the most powerful, like, ceremonial experience they've ever had. Um, so that's another aspect I love about like sound healing more broadly, outside of maybe a sound bath where you go and you show up and you receive, is our own ability to like use our voice. Even if it's just humming, even if we're not comfortable yet with like really belting it out, just like humming and yeah, using our voice box to send frequencies into our body.
What I love that. And my question is, what about that do people find so powerful?
Mm. My interpretation is that a lot of people are very blocked in their expression. So that, I think, first and foremost is very liberating to just simply, yeah, I think because the setting in which it's offered and the way in which I present it and others like me present it is that we're not here to like sing like we're on American Idol or like aim for any, apply any like standards, qualitative standards, let's say, to the voice. But we're here to just like open it and liberate it. And so, yeah, I think first and foremost, a lot of the benefits people receive is they maybe never sing at all, or even hum. And then that can also manifest in them not speaking much. And so there may be ways in which they're not expressing just in everyday life. And I noticed that one really supports the other. Like when I'm really working with these practices or chanting or singing in different ways, I notice it's much easier for me to express my truth and to also maybe feel less heady when I'm looking to share something. Just let the expression flow through you. So I think that's like kind of the broad underpinning of why people have such profound experiences with it. And then I feel that the other aspect is they're experiencing the effects of that practice where, yeah, they're in a way they otherwise haven't probably ever in their lives, using their voice to vibrate different parts of their body. They're feeling that energy move and shift. So there's often like feelings of catharsis or bliss or emotions moving, and usually some sense of like relief afterwards of like, oh, I just like cleared out a bunch of energy and now I feel clear.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's
I,
actually, the final thing I add is it's actually quite pleasurable. That's something that I've learned with the voice too. And even sometimes a block that comes up for people, if somebody has like shame around feeling pleasure, that can also manifest in a block in like the throat and in expression. Because yeah, what I personally find is it's so pleasurable to just sing and open up and like let that energy move. Um, so yeah, that's something I love about it, but it can also be a block to it if we have some pattern where, we feel shame or guilt around like feeling pleasure just simply for being, and simply for expressing. That can show up, but it's also a method to move through that, to like see that, lean into that, and just keep the breath flowing and keep the voice flowing. And
hmm,
the energy shifts.
I had two thoughts. The first is, so on the site where we have, like venues, facilitators, chefs, and then the section for music or sound is musicians.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I think I want to change that. I think it needs to be sound,
Yes.
because when you think of the word musician, and even though if you have music ability, if you have skills, education, you are a musician. But in this setting, it's an offering of sound, it's sound facilitation, it's sound, like you said, people are receiving. It's not performative. It's not like you're on stage on American Idol and you're a musician playing at a wedding. It could be, maybe
Yes.
it could be that, but I think more aligned with what we do or what is done at retreats is that sound is part of the experience.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, I
Mhm.
love that. And that's been a big part of my journey with all of this also is, yeah, just kind of the difference. I feel like it's a continuum in a way, like music and sound, because there's, even versions of music that are very like liberated in terms of no rules. And like, I think of like certain styles of jazz. But of course, some people would judge that as like not music or not what they'd prefer to hear, which that's great. We get to have our preferences. But yeah, it is like the more we move into what I consider maybe pure sound healing, it becomes less musical in the way that we typically conceive of music. It's much more, like there might be zero rhythm. There might be, yeah, it's a lot of like kind of the rules or the typical standards we apply to it, or even like the paradigms in which we would create something tend to dissolve. And there's a lot of value in that. I'm seeing a lot of value, and I'm starting to navigate with the in between like music and more just like spacious sound that maybe has zero structure or um, maybe not even so much patterns playing out in it, but just more spacious, ethereal sound. Um, but yeah, I think what you're touching on is like an important distinction, just because, yeah, if we if we view it only through music, then it can bring in more of these paradigms of, um, yeah, the American Idol stuff, for lack of a better description, like just applying standards to the free expression. And one thing I've also really learned through sound healing is the most important part is the frequency in which, like, if I'm the sound healer, it's the frequency I'm in that moment. So I can sing like maybe something that classically sounds really beautiful, but if I'm kind of in a fearful, anxious state, that's the frequency that's being shared. Versus if I'm in just a state of peace and emptiness, like an open mind, clear mind, and I'm sharing like with love, um, even if it doesn't sound as you might want it to sound on a CD, I personally notice in real time how it's received in the space and the effect it has on the energy. Um, so that's also, I feel like, a really core fundamental aspect to like sound healing, which I think also manifests in music. I think, if someone's singing live, like you feel the energy that they're emitting. But I think perhaps even more so because you kind of show up to open up to that and to receive in sometimes more profound ways than you otherwise would.
Yes. I think the purpose and the intention behind it makes all the difference because it can be something that's inviting people to participate, or it can be something that is purely for entertainment. And
Yes.
they're very different.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. And the other thing I was thinking about, not directly related, I guess, but it, so I was reading a while back because I used to sneeze like this. And I started well, I had like my husband and his family. They're very loud sneezers. And I wasn't used to that. And I was like, oh my God, like what a sneeze, you know? And so I was reading about how we sneeze also relates to
Uh,
how we experience pleasure and
wow.
what we hold back. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna sneeze as loud as my body wants to sneeze because I wanna release that.
Yes.
So there's interesting the correlation because all of this is connected, the ear, nose, and throat. And then
Yes.
there's also the idea that the vaginal area canal is like similar to what's going on in the throat. I don't
Yes.
know if you have any insights on how, like, obviously men don't have that, but there has to be something that there for men too, right?
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
looked into
Energy.
that?
Yeah. Not super in depth, but it's shown up actually working with. I'm reminded of a healer I work with in Kopangan, which is my home in Thailand, and he just I noticed when he's working on my body, he even sometimes during the sessions will point out the mirroring, and it's basically the exact same thing that you're identifying. You know that the throat is mirrored down there, and the way he goes around my body, it seems like everything is mirrored in different ways, and there's those connections. Um, but I know, yeah, I know, just from my own experience with this, how connected those two areas are, and how even with when I'm singing with the channel fully open, it comes all the way from the bottom of the pelvic floor. And, I don't think the lungs literally reach down that low, but like the, I just imagine that's the tissue and the muscles in that area when they relax, it just, it's all interrelated, right? So when you like fully drop into that pelvic floor, for example, it allows everything to open up, including up here. Um, So yeah, I don't know too much about like the specifics of that, but I do know that there's like mirroring like that all over the body, and I have just observed in my experiences how much of a connection there is between the throat and like the sexual and creative areas of our body, and also of course how much expression is is involved in that, because yeah, to I mean, even anytime we're feeling pleasure and we're not expressing anything, that energy in a way is like kind of staying in, right? And I guess there might be moments, depending what you're experiencing, where it like builds, but any energy that eventually builds, like, is going to want to be expressed in some way. Whether that's out here or whether that's through a creative project or making love with somebody or whatever it is. So yeah, and that's where, as I said before, like kind of I also see very interesting parallels between like the shame and the guilt that can arise with sexuality and the shame and the guilt that can arise just from expressing openly. And I think especially when it has some tinge of like pleasure to it. And I also wonder how much that has to do with just this like collective evolution we're on as humanity, with a lot of these things being repressed and suppressed, both sexuality and like expression. So I think
Hmm.
there's all kinds of interesting links there.
Yeah. I've often wondered what is you have the rooster I hear behind you.
Yeah.
That's, I know it's a rooster. I know the sound the rooster makes. This is the sound the rooster makes, like the little whoop.
Yeah.
And then you have the birds, the dogs, they have their unique sound. And I thought about it, like as human beings, what is our unique sound? Because talking
Mm.
is really something that we learned to do. But is that
Yes.
our sound?
I don't think so. No, it doesn't feel as natural, but it's a great question because, and maybe it reveals like how unique humans are, because my first thought is that there's so many potential sounds that could fit into that. Yeah. And I guess that connects me to like the different emotions and the way those are expressed like in different ways with a different frequency, which is a lot of the magic that lies in sound healing also, is to learn to play with those frequencies. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think would be humans sound?
I also think it's difficult to pinpoint because we make a lot of noise nowadays.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we've kind of overdone it as far as like the sounds we make. But I don't know, maybe an exercise where I'm remembering some exercise. I don't know if it was when I was a kid or if I saw kids do this where the facilitator or the guide goes around and says, okay, now make a happy face. And then you make a happy face. Okay, now make a
Mm,
sad face. Okay, now make an angry face. But instead of facial expressions, like what if we did that with sound, with no words? It's like,
yes.
okay, well, what does angry sound like? What
Yeah.
does happy sound like? What does sad sound like? And just listen to the sounds that people make. And if they're similar or if they're different and how.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, and it connects me to kind of like the rainbow that is human expression and human emotions, and like, yeah, how different all those sounds would be if you really went through all of those different energies.
Mhm. Something to think about.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, so I think the question's actually like answered by a human in what state of being, right? Like a human in a really like open, loving, not taking life seriously is probably like a laugh, you know? Um, and then somebody really vibrating in fear or in anger, or that's gonna have a totally different song. And I guess, yeah, it's striking me that that's what's unique about humanity. I think other animals have similar, but probably not as much of a range as we do.
yeah, but it's interesting. Even when you said a human that's happy and in a loving space. Is that what you said? There would be a
I think
laugh.
so, something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, I that it wouldn't be a laugh for me.
No.
No, it would be like a, like just
Oh
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, like a human
I might be
alleluia
smiling.
sound.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's interesting to see also because just like we have different love languages, we have different ways, perspectives. So
Yeah.
maybe the way we express that, all the sounds. I don't know. It's interesting to experiment maybe
Yes.
one day.
Yeah.
Hmm. So let's go back to the sound bowls.
Yeah.
How did you start? How did you get into that?
I was visiting a friend in Bali. I had like a few months before had a very profound and deep awakening experience, and I was over in that part of the world, and kind of an old friend was in Bali at that time, and he had been working with sound healing at that stage for maybe like a year and a half, 2 years, and I'd been to two sound baths of his before, but they were kind of pre my big awakening moment. And so I experienced them as like really nice and relaxing, but I would say nothing all that profound happened. I was like, oh yeah, that was kind of a nice, relaxing, like meditative experience. Like, and I enjoyed it. And, you know, I went back a second time and would have continued going. And yeah, so then the third one happened to be when I went to visit him in Bali. And very unexpectedly, I had a deeply transcendent experience. All of the tension in my body just completely released, and my mind was just completely clear and open. And as that was happening in that clear mind, messages started coming through of like, this is what you're here to share with others. And it was as much about the sound as it was about the experience I was in. Like the message was, you're here to share this feeling, like this experience. Um, and what I would add to it now is like, and the healing that that provided, you're here to like share this with other beings. So yeah, basically from there, I just started exploring it. Yeah, thankfully, like one of my really good friends who I shared the sound bath with, you know, had kind of all his gear. So it was, at least at the beginning, I got to kind of like, you know, play around and observe the way that he worked with sound and the way that he held those spaces. And yeah, went and got my own singing bowls, and yeah, just kind of gradually over time, just like deepened. But it was very natural, and it was very like, I think the message was so strong and the experience I had was so profound that it provided a fair bit of ease in just like moving into that path. I think there was a way in which like my soul and even like my body recognized what had happened and recognized that as something that I could naturally share with others. And yeah, it's been about I think 5-ish years since then now, and I feel like I learn more every day. Not so much in an intellectual sense, although that part is really fun for me too, like nerding out on the science and um, even like the evidence for a lot of these things. But it's more just every time I sit down with the bowls or with any of my instruments, I feel like I receive so much and um, just learn through the experience of being in these spaces.
Mhm. What are some of the other instruments that you play?
I work with gongs also. So I have crystal bowls. I have a crystal chalice that's basically a crystal bowl that I can move around with and also work directly over people's bodies and energy fields with. So that one's yeah, that's a really special instrument. Yeah, and then I have gongs. I have some flutes. I have some different kind of like percussive, yeah, like kind of I have a bunch of different elements that simulate water in different ways, like a rain stick and like these other shelly things that I don't even know what to
Mhm.
call it. Um, and then like some shakers that are sometimes involved. And oh, and chimes, like different types of chimes, different like rack chimes that will have like different cylinders and chords. And then also sometimes the handheld ones, like the popular ones that are known as like koshi chimes. Um, which yeah, just have a really nice sound. And they have the different elements for each of them.
Mhm.
And and voice is really like the other probably most important instrument that I bring into the space too.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Lots of different instruments. I love Koshi chimes. The first time I
Oh, they're
heard
so
a
nice.
Koshi chime, it was when I was getting this tattoo from Manuela. She's I interviewed her on the channel. Wow, what an experience. It's like
Uh,
it's a ceremony, and she calls it a talisman, and
yeah.
there's lots of intention, lots of prep work around it. I fell asleep while she was doing hand poking me.
Wow.
Yeah, but I had my eyes closed and she just started playing the Koshi chime. I didn't see it. I didn't know what it was. It was the first time I had heard it. And it just felt so otherworldly. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, what is that sound? And it felt so good to hear it and just receive it. And I'm like, what is this thing? I need this. I still haven't gotten any, but I very much appreciate the what it offers.
Yeah, they're really nice. They're yeah, I think they're Japanese and like sometimes the Japanese just do things really well. And I don't know, the Koshi chimes are some example of that. Yeah, always
Yeah,
such
they
like
are.
a pleasant sound and yeah, very otherworldly.
Mhm. What are some, you mentioned, you said the word learn, and my light bulb just went off. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned on this sound journey?
Mm. So one I've already touched on, and that's that my frequency or the frequency of the facilitator is maybe the most fundamental and important aspect of it, because we're really like holding that prayer and holding that frequency and emitting that out. So yeah, that's one of the more subtle layers of sound healing because on the surface it might just look like I'm moving my hand, I'm moving a mallet around a bowl and it's producing a vibration and that's traveling out, and that's 100% true. But I've also come to understand in a way that I can't prove, um, that the energy that I'm in as I'm moving that mallet around the bowl is also being broadcast into the space. Um, so yeah, I feel like that's kind of the most fundamental one, and a lot of the other learnings like are derivatives of that. Um, Yeah, what else? The other one is the value of silence, and to even understand, but in a really embodied way, that sound is rapid alterations of sound and silence. Even a sound that sounds like it's only sound, there's silence within that. But that on a more macro scale, within a sound journey, I find it really important to play with full spectrum of that, where there's like very delicate quiet sounds and even silence at times, and especially to allow certain tones to just echo out and kind of finish. And then there's times where it's more dynamic and even maybe building energy. um but I think for myself as a new sound healer, and even a lot of new sound healers I observe, we need to play with silence much more, and maybe less sound happening at times. Um, so that's something I feel like I learned through experience also.
Okay, that's a good tip. I bought some bowls. Uh,
Oh,
yeah. So I haven't really dove really like where I'm practicing every day. It's just something where I'm in the mood and I put them out and I start playing, and I've played a few events, but having been classically trained, going back to what you said about patterns and just moving away from the rules and the structures of things, I have found it to be challenging because
yeah.
my mind wants to play the chords and my mind wants to have the progressions, the correct
Yes.
progressions, and then the structure feels safe.
Yeah.
And so what advice would you give to someone like me who likes to stay in that safe space, but they also want to, let go of that and just allow what wants to come through to be without judging it, and still
Yes.
know that it can be that someone can benefit from it, even though it's not,
Yes. Oh, that's a great question. And it actually touches on the other, I think, like biggest learning um, I've had with sound healing, which is that harmony is is super valuable. So a lot of what you're sharing are things that you want to like maybe hang on to, but maybe not be attached to, and not be maybe as much in the head about making it happen, so to speak. But yeah, really, the core takeaway from my experience with sound healing is that my other biggest task related to the frequency, but is to be an empty vessel in which I'm not thinking about what I need to do next, but I'm quiet enough where now at this point, I can literally hear the instruments playing themselves before I go to play them. They like communicate with me. And, but that comes from being in an empty mind space. And that's definitely like a journey, just as a human, to like learn how to cultivate more like meditative awareness, more spacious awareness. Um, but the beautiful part about sound healing is if you're working with certain frequencies, those frequencies also entrain those same brainwave states. So I have certain bowls that tend to entrain theta state, which, yeah, if my brain is in theta state, I'm not being super analytical and being like, oh, I need to make sure this comes at this time and then this thing and that thing. I'm not thinking at all. It's actually just pure presence. Um, and I will say that only comes from when you have enough familiarity and practice where you can let it go. Like one of my favorite um, artists, and even like someone I consider a spiritual guide, is Prince, like the artist Prince. And a quote that he had that I can't say verbatim is that what he basically says, when I'm on stage, I'm out of body, but it's because we have practiced and like we know every song like the back of our hand. And that's what allows me to just completely let go in that space where you hear Prince like channel absolute genius that could only come really from the void, from source, from whatever you want to describe it. it's not a designed, planned thing. It's just the I would call it the greatness of God, like channeling through an artist like that. But he really opened my eyes to this yes and of when you're really prepared and you have a sense of, yeah, how everything can flow together, then during the experience you can drop all of that stuff and just be present with it. um but yeah, I will say, like, a lot of what you are speaking to are things that are good to retain, but that perhaps you can, like, if we're talking about harmony, for example, like, yeah, those chords are going to have harmony, and there's even scientifically that tends to struck, like, just as the sound has like a symmetry essentially, which we could call harmony, that then also reflects in what someone receives. You know, even the waters in our body, we're 70 some percent water. Our waters are then going to start to structure in symmetrical patterns. So
Mm.
I use harmony for 98% of my sound healings. But for 2%, I'll play with different levels of like disharmony. Um, or, you know, yeah, even that's kind of a continuum. There's sounds that are super disharmonic and like, whoa. And I'll almost never play that in a sound healing. Um, but somewhere in the in between, I might play with it, and that, what I notice is that can kind of like drive up stagnant energy, or even like kind of trigger an emotion that might be already dormantly sitting in the body. But the key for me, at least from my perspective, is then you reharmonize it. So just
Yeah.
as you might, even in a movie, you might bring on suspense and then you like resolve it. Um, so these are the types of things we can play with sound, and it's helpful to have some classical understanding or just some awareness of what harmonizes, what sounds fundamentally, like what sounds good.
Hmm.
Not in an analytical way, but just we feel it. It sounds good, and harmony feels good, quote unquote. Um, but then also, yeah, to cultivate that more like trance state and more like meditative mind where your body and your heart, your soul intuitively knows what to play in those moments. And that's where kind of the analytical side and the intuitive side can dance together. And that's where I feel the full spectrum of the magic comes online.
Yes. Beautifully said. I like that.
Thank you.
The dissonance is my favorite. I love the dissonance. It's almost like, when you're in a physical activity where they tell you, okay, squeeze your shoulders and then
Yes.
release. It's like, because you're like, oh, it sounds off. It sounds off. It's like everything you said is rising. And then when you
Yes.
resolve it, it's like, oh,
Yes,
yes, that's
exactly.
nice.
They do literally the same
So
thing with
amazing.
many meditation techniques. Before you meditate, I mean, there's yoga that is its own pre-meditative technique, but many of them, they just simply ask you to tense every muscle in your body, and then you let go, and then you begin to meditate because it facilitates what you're talking about. Like, yeah, compressing that energy and then releasing it.
Sounds like a lot of wind
There
over
has been a
there.
lot of wind at the lake these last few days since I've been here, basically. Yeah.
Are you on a lake?
Basically, I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at volcanoes and lake
Wow,
when I look behind this screen.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Sounds lovely.
Do you want to see?
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's Lake Atiban and the beautiful volcanoes.
Are they active?
I believe one of them, don't quote me on that.
All right.
Either there's three on the lake, either all three are dormant, or one might be some version of active. I think there's like different classifications or something, but I know the one right on the lake isn't, and that one's probably the only one in real shooting range of here.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Good stuff. Wow,
Yeah.
three volcanoes in one space.
Yes.
It's intense.
Yeah, there's a fourth one off in the distance, and that one's very active. So that's what's kind of nice is you'll be sitting on the lake, especially at night. You'll see the three big ones on the lake, but then in the distance, sometimes you'll see this like red, and it's like the lava like spitting out of it. It's called
Oh,
Volcan
wow.
Fuego, which is like volcano fire, and so that's another cool part too. We get to see the fireworks, but not be so close to it.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's kind of cool. We have a volcano here. It's the Popocatépetl. Say that
Ooh,
three times
that's a hand.
fast.
Yeah,
Yeah. Took me a while I was like, the Papa what? But I got it after a while.
that's
It's
impressive.
active. Yeah,
It
it's
is.
Popocatépetl. There we go. It's active, but it just smokes. There's no lava. Thank God.
Okay.
Yeah. It just likes to smoke. It's cool. You do you, you know?
That must mean there's lava
So,
somewhere, right? But not where any humans can see it.
well, we've never seen it spit,
Okay. Yeah.
so or spill. Yeah, because we are within shooting range, so
Yeah.
that would not be good.
No.
That would not be good. So tell me about your group, your tribe, or the people that you go on retreat with, because I saw the flyer, I guess, or like the graphic for the retreat, and
Yeah.
there's a bunch of people. Are you always together, or do you facilitate with different groups?
Great question. Yeah. So this group was unique to this particular retreat, to the Tikal Sacred Pilgrimage. Um, there's a few of those within the group where we've like co-created before. Um, and so yeah, in that particular retreat, that particular pilgrimage, we really went heavy on. I just wanted the message channeling through me was like have a dream team of facilitators. Like there can't be too much magic, too much support, too much yeah, too many offerings in the space. So yeah, we ended up with I think it was including we had two local guides, Tata Hector and Silvana, who were super invaluable to like guide us to those sacred sites and have that real connection to that environment. And then there were five others of us that came. And actually, Lake Atitlan is like kind of what all connects us in one way or another. I met everyone except for one here at the lake, and the one that I didn't meet at the lake, she spent her name's Christine Olivia. She spent so much time here, and we kind of had parallel paths here, just without ever crossing paths. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like a unique group that's like Rolando and Rosa Maya were two. They're a couple, and they brought their daughter Ishkanil, who's this like gorgeous little, I think 8 year old. Um, and so it was really special to have like a family in the retreat also, and like yeah, have that energy of the child and our inner child in the space. And so yeah, it's kind of yeah, it's an unofficial network of like healers and facilitators that yeah, we kind of in our own flow. We're also all a little bit international, so it depends where we are in the world. Um, but yeah, at this stage, it's kind of like an organic uh, group of beings that are just connected through mutual love for like these offerings and these experiences. But I actually am in the process of forming a more formal version of that, which will be called the Be Atman Conscious Healing Collective, and will basically be a vehicle to facilitate and support us coming together more often with different retreats, and also eventually bringing healing centers into the U.S. is a core part of that vision to not only bring people like kind of out of the matrix and coming to places like this to heal where it's a very supportive environment, but also creating supportive environments like inside U.S. cities and inside these communities with kind of the rhetorical question of like, what if we gather in community around healing and around reconnecting to the earth instead of maybe the some of the other ways in which we're connecting these days.
Yes. That's a great vision, a great plan. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah,
Where do
it's
you know where
exciting.
in the US you'd want to do it?
Yeah, I'm gonna start in Minnesota because that's where the majority of my
Oh.
network is. Yeah,
Okay.
I spent 17 years. I'm from Australia originally, but I lived in Minnesota for 17 years and went to high school, college, and then also law school, because surprise, my past life was as a lawyer. And so, yeah, it's also just it's a unique city in terms of, um, there's a lot of emphasis on health and wellness and, and the outdoors. It feels like kind of just uniquely positioned for the first one. But the vision would be to create a replicable, model that can go to different cities, but also really like enough flexibility where it really reflects like what that city needs and its culture and the community that's there.
That sounds fabulous.
Yeah.
Thinking
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Actually, like thinking of that sound healing experience you asked me about or I shared, it really began coming, this vision began coming through then. So I've really been like patiently kind of downloading it for years now. And a core aspect of that too was I needed to meet my tribe, our tribe, in order because I can't make it happen myself and I don't want that at all.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, it's been many years in the making, but just like kind of patiently let it evolve. And it also feels like the collective's really ready for it now. 5 years ago, it felt, at least to me, like it would have been a little bit of an uphill battle. But even just what I'm seeing with the popular culture in the US, like there's much more of an emphasis on like healing and doing things in a different way and kind of disconnecting from some of these ways of being that people are realizing don't really serve us ultimately. Um,
Yes. People are definitely seeking it and are hungry for it.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So, last question.
All right.
Do you have any advice or your choice? It could be advice that you want to give to the retreat community, or maybe just a message that you would like to put out there.
Mm, yeah, do it for the love, do it for the passion. Um, yeah, for those who, yeah, I guess what was coming through just now was really for other beings on this path that want to create retreats and create experiences and create ceremonies. Um, what I keep learning time and time again is like the magic happens when we are motivated by just the pure love of the experience. And even if the goal, or one of the main goals is like generating prosperity and abundance around these experiences and offerings, it's only going to flow from that like true devotion and from that true love and from that true desire to be a positive, influence in people's lives and to provide like these healing spaces. And so, yeah, that's something that I've feel like I've only really like fully learned now. And most of it's just been a deconditioning from the past life I lived, so to speak, where everything was so motivated by like money and even, often not because we like wanted a bunch of money, but just to actually be able to sustain a lifestyle that actually should be available to everyone. And lo and behold, like nature can provide that to us. So yeah, I guess that would be the other part of my advice to all of humans is like this earth has so much natural abundance all the time. And our own being is a direct reflection embodiment of that abundance. And so to like really remember that, stay connected to that, stay connected to the value of like a deep breath of clean air and to just simply drinking clean water and putting our feet on the earth. Um, in the modern world, things have like become so like overcomplicated and I would say really disconnected from the source. Like we're being sold things that are many um many steps away from like what we actually really need. Um, so I feel like that kind of just applies to everyone and myself, whether we're whatever path we're on, is to really kind of slow down and reconnect to our true nature, and that any of our creations and offerings be in that same divine timing. Which, to finish that thought, like divine timing isn't just some imagined ethereal thing. It's the patterns of nature. It's the patterns of creation. Divine timing is the timing of life. And the more we pay attention and tune ourselves to that, the more that everything we create is within that harmony and within that beautiful unfolding. So that's something
Yeah.
I just keep learning deeper every day. Every time I feel like an impulse to come out of that, just like bringing myself back to the center and back to the earth, and yeah, back to the heaven that already exists right here and right now.
Yeah. It's a great message, great advice. Just focus on love, gratitude, less is more, keep it simple, take
Yes,
what you need and reevaluate what do you really need?
that's the key question to keep
Yeah.
asking. Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
being here.
much. It's my pleasure. It's our pleasure.